Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the coffee break. Do we have everyone in the room? Please be seated as we are going to start our next session. As the way content is created and shared changes, what roles do the media play in the future of storytelling? For that, we have Jaemark to present his provocation. And on the couch, as our respondents are Keng, Nenden, and Yo. And this session will be moderated by Devi. Without further ado, I would like to invite Devi to the stage to hand over.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you have your coffee and your snacks and ready for this next discussion, which will be very interesting. Welcome to our second panel of the day, and where we will talk about a very important part of our job, of our profession, very important part of journalism, and also my favorite subject, storytelling. In this panel, we will try to envision the future of storytelling in the era of AI. My name is Devi, and I'll be your moderator for the next 90 minutes. If you've been a journalist long enough, in my case is maybe 3 decades, you've seen, I'm sure, how the news media and news organization have evolved over time, and how we, as news organization, as a journalism practitioner, constantly have to adapt to the ever-changing landscape. And right now, we are at another pivotal moment in the evolution of storytelling, as our AI continues to reshape the landscape of media and narrative in a profound and innovative ways. In this discussion, we will explore the transformative power of AI in creating new forms of narrative, and also at what we can do to preserve the integrity and the authenticity of storytelling. How can AI serve as a tool to expand human creativity rather than diminish it? How can we harness its potential to enrich our stories while being vigilant about ethical implications? And what will be the role of media professionals like me and you in this fast-shifting landscape? So we have gathered here an esteemed panel of experts to explore all these questions. I would like to welcome them, and I will just call them one by one. The first one, we have Jaemark Tordecilla from Innovation Media Expert. Please give him a round of applause. And then, so let me just introduce them one by one. Jaemark is a journalist and media advisor and technologist from the Philippines who focuses on AI and newsroom innovation. He was a fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University in 2024, and his work on building AI tools for newsrooms in developing countries has been featured by the Reuters Institute and the Computational Journalism Lab at Northwestern University. He spent nearly a decade as editor-in-chief and head of digital media for the Philippines' top news organization, leading all editorial and audience development activities for online platforms. So the second speaker we have is Peerapon Anutarasoat. I hope I pronounced that okay. Please give him a round of applause. Peerapon is the director of Thai news agency Shore and Share Center. He launched Thailand's first fact-checking TV program, Shore Before You Share. It's very mouthful. That was in 2015, and it has since evolved into a comprehensive fact-checking platform spanning multiple channels and content formats. He currently leads the Shore and Share Center team, overseeing data monitoring, fact-finding, and content creation, while spearheading initiatives to promote literacy, education, and sustainable societal impact. He also has a book where he introduced a fresh approach to conveying digital literacy. The book is called How to Sanitize Your Digital Life. I think I will need to buy this book. I hope you have it in English. Okay, So the next one is Kuang Keng, which we will call Keng. Please welcome Keng. Keng is from Data N. He's a practitioner at the intersection of technology, journalism, and data analyst. He's the data editor at the Pulitzer Center, and he supports and mentors 3 fellowships investigating issues related to tropical rainforests, ocean, and AI accountability. He's won several awards, SOPA Awards, Data Journalism Award, and Fetisov Award for his work in data journalism. Keng used to work for Malaysia Kini, and he is a Fulbright Scholar, Google Journalism Fellow, and Toe Knight Fellow. And last but not least, a local celebrity of its kind. Of course, we know her. Nenden Arum from SAFEnet. An advocate for digital rights and freedom of expression. Nenden is a researcher and advocate focusing on digital rights and internet freedom. With a computer science degree and a journalism background, rare. Most journalists come from social background, but she is passionate about exploring the intersection between technology and social issues. Nenden is also the executive director of SAFEnet, which promotes digital rights and internet freedom in the region and supports technology-facilitated gender-based violence and digital rights violation victims. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Okay, I'm going to sit now, and we will begin. So this is a different panel system here going on. We're going to have a provocation presentation from Jaemark himself, and then we'll have the couch panelists, we call them couch panelists, to respond, to reflect on the presentation. And then we'll give it to the floor to ask questions. Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome Jaemark, and he will begin his presentation.
Hi, good morning. We realize we're the only thing standing between you and lunch. So we'll try to make this a very interesting and not get you too hungry. Although hungry might be good. Before I begin, let me introduce myself again. I'm Jaemark Tordecilla. I'm a journalist and technologist from the Philippines. I also came from a tech background, graduated with a degree in computer science, did a master's in technology management, and a few years into my tech career, I made what's either the best or the worst decision of my life, which was to become a journalist. I still don't know the answer to that. I ended up becoming editor-in-chief of GMA News Online, which is a big news organization in the Philippines. And I left a couple of years ago to do a fellowship at Harvard University. And it was the most interesting time to be on campus because everyone was talking about AI. It had only been a few months since the release of ChatGPT. So everyone on campus was talking about AI, but no one was talking about AI in the context of, number one, journalism, and number two, the Global South. And so that sort of fell onto me, and so that's how I ended up being here. And now we have a full ballroom of people thinking about AI in the context of journalism and the Global South. So good job to us. I usually begin my presentations with, sorry, it got lost. Okay. By bragging, because it's nice to brag. Before I left GMA, it was the most trusted news organization in the Philippines, and it was also number one in terms of online use, online consumption by our audiences. So that was a big achievement for me and my team. But it didn't come easy because in the mid-2010s, we had a big crisis after Facebook's pivot away from news. And at that time, our traffic, more than half of it was coming from Facebook. And so we needed to figure out new strategies to reach out to our audiences. And so since 2018, that's what we've been trying to figure out. how to make our content and our news more relevant to audiences, and also to meet them where they are, whatever the device or platform they were using. And so we've been experimenting with all sorts of forms of storytelling, including this one. Steph, can you play the video, please?
Kailan po ba yung eleksyon?
May 14.
Mali!
Hindi ko po kasi alam. Hindi po ako masyadong updated ngayon sa election.
May 13, 2019.
Now!
All right. So we produced this in 2019. The guy who's dancing is an influencer. Everyone now talks about whether we should engage with influencers here in 2025, but we've been doing it since 2019. This was for the elections in the Philippines, and it was a way to present, information about the elections in a fun, engaging manner, in language that our audiences understood. And so this video had millions of views and thousands of engagement. Of course, there are questions about, there are a lot of questions from traditionalists who would ask, wait, is this journalism? So I've been thinking about that question for a while now, and I decided my answer is, I don't care. Here's another thing we did for the 2022 elections. Steph, can you play the first video on the left? There's no sound, but this pretty lady is one of the biggest, most popular actresses in the Philippines. And this is an Instagram filter where she answers a quiz about the elections. And so her fans and our followers could also answer a quiz about the elections. Again, it's another way to present information about the elections in formats that our younger viewers can understand. This next video is a special report we produced. You can play it, Steph, about harassment in the Philippines. But instead of a long-form video, we did it with illustrations. And we wanted to center the stories of women who experience harassment in everyday life.
To get home from the office, I had to walk to the MRT, ride the MRT, take the bus, take the jeepney, and then either ride the tricycle or walk. On that day, I was already at the jeep, and I noticed this guy who...
All right, so there was no long-form story. There were illustrations about what women wore when they were sexually harassed. And then there were videos and audio of them telling their own stories and centering their stories, and it was very impactful. It won SOPA awards. And so the change in our mindset was trying to figure out ways to tell stories in different ways. Of course, the articles never went away. The traditional broadcast video didn't go away. But that became our mission, to fight for the stories that we believed in, the stories we thought our audiences needed to hear, and to meet them on whatever device, on whatever platform they would choose to meet us. And so now, I think our strategy proved very prescient, because this is from 2025. The Philippines is #1 in the world in proportion of people who would rather watch the news rather than read the news or listen to the news, right? It's not an indictment on our audience. It's just their preference. And so that sort of, affirmed the strategy that we had, because we knew our audience would rather consume their stories and their information in these platforms and in these formats. And so the Philippines is a unique case, but I suspect it's similar to a lot of countries in the global south. So a lot of the things we're talking about here is actually talking about what our audience needs and what our audience wants, and trying to meet them where they are. I'm sorry, this is not a very clear chart, but it shows the rankings for ChatGPT. This is from, I think, April. Indonesia is #4 in usage. The Philippines is #5, so congratulations to us. And this is my favorite graph that I present. This is our search interest for the Philippines for ChatGPT. And if you notice, the first big spike happens around August 2023. Can anyone think what happened in August 2023 that made people want to search for ChatGPT? Okay, spoiler alert, it's the opening of classes, right? And then there's a big drop during Christmas break. There's a big valley during summer break. And then every time classes start, use of or interest in ChatGPT also spikes in the Philippines. So without knowing, we sort of know who is using ChatGPT in the Philippines, right? And so, and I show this to journalists in the Philippines, after they have a minor heart attack, right? I tell them the impact of this technology is that the next generation of people, the next generation of our audiences will have grown up looking to chatbots as a source of information, right? And it's very important because worldwide, that's sort of the trend. This is from the 2025 Reuters Institute Digital News Report. About 4% of respondents 18 to 24 use chatbots as a source of news. Interestingly, about 4% of respondents who are 18 to 24 also depend on newspapers as a source of news. So among young people worldwide, as many young people use newspapers as a source of news as they do chatbots. So think about that, the implications of that. So what would news look like in the age of AI? So some experiments you may have heard, people are trying to put their archives into chatbots so that you could chat with news. You can do it for your news organization right now. There are tools out there that would allow your audiences to chat with news, ask questions about it, and get personalization. A lot of my work over the past year and a half has also been trying to explore new avenues to tell stories. For example, I created a chatbot that allows anyone to chat with the Philippines national budget. It works well with AI because what AI does is it takes your English language question, translates that into code, and it actually queries the Philippine national budget's database. You don't need to be like Keng, who's a data journalism expert or a background in data analysis, to be able to find stories and to find information from such a large data set. Some of the things that I found, I'm sorry it's not clear. This is just a map. I used ChatGPT to generate these graphics, but this is a map of all public works infrastructure on the left for the Philippines for 2025. And on the right, this is very interesting. So basketball is really big in the Philippines. So one day I woke up, asked the chatbot, how many basketball court projects are there in the Philippines? Gave me a list, and I noticed you can organize them by district. And that dot on the upper right, almost outside the graph, I found out that there's one small district in rural Philippines that had 11% of all basketball projects in the national budget for 2025. It was worth 1 billion pesos. So imagine there are more than 30 engineering districts in the Philippines. One accounted for 11% of all basketball court projects. And I did some research. There are only about 30 villages in that engineering district. So we're talking about 3 new basketball court projects for every village in that small portion of the Philippines, right? And now, it's obviously anomalous. The data shows that. And what's interesting is that's where the job of the AI ends and where the job of the journalist begins. So now newsrooms in the Philippines could go to those places, ask their congressmen, what's the deal with this allocation? And so I wouldn't have found this story if it wasn't easy enough for me to chat with the data. Another thing I found just chatting with the bot, I found that the Philippines House of Representatives had a bigger advertising budget than the Health Ministry and the Tourism Ministry combined. Right? On its face, that's very anomalous already. Why would the Parliament need such a big advertising budget? Right? Again, that question needs to be asked by journalists on the ground. AI couldn't answer those questions anymore. But digging in a little deeper, I found that it started happening in 2024. In the 2024 budget, there was a big spike in the advertising budget of the House of Representatives. And what happened before that? There was a new speaker. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but the new Speaker of the House, his family happened to own a lot of media outlets. And so it's very interesting that it coincided that the House of Representatives had a big spike in their advertising budget. Okay, but I'm not accusing anyone of anything. A more recent experiment, I turned a 4,000-word investigative feature into a 30-minute documentary video just to experiment with how AI can do it. So these are illustrations using Midjourney to be able to animate the video because, as I mentioned earlier, folks in the Philippines would rather watch the news than read the news. Here's an example, an excerpt of the video. Steph, can you play this?
He watched as his father's headless body staggered and fell to the ground. Confirming
volume,
Matubato's account is difficult. A former communist cadre active in Davao during that time said government forces used beheadings as a form of psychological terror. The guerrillas retaliated with killings of their own, he said, but their methods were different. They typically used guns or knives to sever the jugular vein. They did not cut off heads.
All right. So the 4,000-word article turned into a 33-minute video. If I had to work with humans, it would have taken me weeks to produce this video. But since I used AI for all the images, the animations, the voiceovers, even the music, it took me 2 days to do it. And a couple of interesting things regarding the reaction for this video. The first is that everyone liked the images. They thought it was very powerful. The only ones who pushed back, the community who pushed back, are artists. They didn't like the fact that we use generative AI to generate images for the video. But I was talking to a visual journalism professor recently who saw this video, and he said he was telling his students, I think photography is going to be safe, but if you're an illustrator for a media organization, it might be time to find other skills, just because illustrations are at that level already. The other one is that when I showed this video to American colleagues to ask them what they thought, they found the voice robotic and monotonous. They didn't like it at all. Oh, it sounds AI. But when I had a Filipino journalist listen to it, including the author of the original piece, their first question to me was, wait, this is so lifelike. Is this AI? And the reason for that disconnect is that there was a very slight hint of a Filipino accent when you listen to that video. And you wouldn't know it if you didn't have a Filipino ear. And so that representation in the data set actually led to greater acceptance from Filipino audiences of something that's AI generated. Let me conclude by saying All my experiments, whenever I've published them, they've gone viral, they've been shared by news outlets, not just in the Global South, but across the world, because they're unique and it's new to even Western newsrooms. I don't think we're far behind in terms of innovation. No one knows what they're doing either. And so I think all the tools that I've created illustrate the need for journalists to be active in designing these tools for the newsroom. We're not just consumers of technology, but there's a very valuable role we need to play in designing and figuring out how these technologies are implemented, not just in the newsrooms, but elsewhere in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaemark. Didn't I say it was a provocation? What did you guys think? Okay, I would just like to ask if any of you feel this emotion. Scared? Anybody raise their hand scared? Scared? Threatened? Under threat? Optimistic? Hopeful? Hopeful. Okay, good. Okay, well, we will unpack all this with the help of our panelists, our couch panelists. And I think we will start with Peerapon first because we're dealing with data and veracity and all this stuff that is like the values of journalism.
Okay, thank you. I need to admit unprofessionally that I'm still nervous. Even I have a lot of clips, more than 3,000 clips exposed online, but I'm still nervous on this live stage. What Jaemark did present, envision us is, I think he gave us the experience, the past, the present, maybe the future in this panel that gave us a lot of what we are facing and challenging. So today I will use my like five or 6 minutes time in this first round to support him and to support him because I feel the same and I like stand in the same shoe as him. His experience, like he graduated on computer science, and you need to ask him how he became the editor in the newsroom. But he graduated in computer science, and I did not graduate in computer science, but I interested in computer science. So after I graduated, I working in the computer magazine. So I wrote articles about computer and a lot of technology magazine at that time. So I think is the perfect mix that journalists with the technical skill like him can lead or innovate something in this AI era. So I support this kind of skill set that if you have technical skill, you can add more understanding, comprehensive on journalistic skill. And if you have you have a great journalistic skill, you can add more technical skill. I want to ask any of you that came here, arrived here by airplane. Yeah. So over the past decade, we heard the news about pilot error on and the plane crash. I love to watch the air crash investigation documentary. So yeah. So in past decade, we saw a lot of interesting pilot errors. and even accidental misstep or mental health error. And then came the question that, are we ready for to let AI fly an airplane? Will you? Yeah. So I think it's the same analogy that do you let AI like fly our newsroom to somewhere? And yeah, I think it's interesting question that we are facing now. So maybe we can imagine that when you sit on an airplane, fasten your seat belt, and you heard a voice that, good afternoon, passenger, this is Air GPT 7.0. Like, your pilot speaking, I bring you to your destination promptly. And yes, it maybe sounds scary, but I don't know in the future, maybe we ready for that or not. But I think this is the same thing that happened with newsroom. But our audience, most of our audience not feel like the same when I asked you the question that will you fly on an airplane that AI fly and instead of human pilot. Yeah. But now people, when they read the news, when they watch the video that created by AI, it's turned out that they're happy with it. The algorithm of platform gave a lot of attention, and furthermore, the monetization, the money goes to that kind of creation. In Thailand, we got a lot. I saw a lot of this kind of creation. Like few months ago, there was a student in Thailand, like student in school. He or she created ASMR clip and published on social media and on like video platform, and they got more than 100,000 baht in the revenue from online, like programmatic advertising revenue. So and come after the VO3 from Gemini enable a lot of people to create 8-second video. In Thailand, we saw interesting case. It's called Luang Ta Bun Jing. It's a 8-second senior old monk say the wisdom word. And that channel start from 0 to 100,000 follower on TikToks in just less than a week. And some people still think that at least this is more good than human real monks. maybe if you follow the situation of Buddhist monk situation in Thailand, now we have a lot of big news about scam or a lot of like something that shake up the Buddhist religious in Thailand. So so the short clip from AI or short content from AI can make money. When that system happen, it challenge a lot on us because there are no journalistic or journalism thinking in that process. You can make money with content without journalism skill or like ethics of journalists. So we need to be ready to be there. In the documentary of the air crash, there are a standard exchange between pilot and co-pilot. When the pilot they watch that they experience that what's wrong with the co-pilot or what's wrong with the situation that he want to take back the control. He will say, my aircraft and the co-pilot will extend return your aircraft to return control to him. And in some military context, or in the civic commercial airline, they will say like, I have control, and the co-pilot say, you have control. I think there are some times that we need to aware how AI will take us to, and how AI will bring our newsroom to, how AI will bring our newsroom trust to. So maybe sometime we need to say something like that pilot, like, I have control, my newsroom, and we hopefully that AI will return to you that your newsroom, not return to you that, oh, this is already my newsroom now. So I think I hopeful, I expect I have the optimist one that we can now again we'll use these tools as the creation tools. We will use this AI tool as a creation tool, like we use paper and print, like we use the microphone, like we use the camera to be as a tools of storytelling. But this tool is very challenging too. When we talk about AI ethics, even you can ask AI by yourself. Compare the AI technology to other technology in the past that need to have an ethics. They will say in the top 5 that there are nuclear technology that needs the ethic, like internet technology that needs the ethics. So I think newsroom, we need to promote the ethics using of AI, promote the literacy using of AI among newsroom and among the readers, and to let leaders have enough force to make the marketing or market mechanism to gain to return the sustainability business to the trusted newsroom. Like this morning slide that journalism is actually is public goods, but they don't have any kind of support as a public goods. Yeah, so I will end this round with this.
Thank you, thank you. Please give him a round of applause. I recently read an article also talking about air crash. Sorry for you guys who are flying back. But there was, like I read in that article that because pilots are so reliant on automation now, their skills have also declined. So in the event that the automation system is not working or in trouble, their response or reflex is actually much less skillful than before when the automation system is not so dominant. I think we'll get to this, but I want to take this to our next speaker, Keng, and we talk about skill. I guess that is related to skill, but we also talk about how can this AI, the whole tools and system, and technology, how can it actually enhance when it comes to using data? We've seen from how Jaemark was showing how it's being used already. I think newsroom have already used to a certain extent, a form of artificial intelligence to support the data gathering and analysis. But how can we use that as to create content or to enhance our way of storytelling?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. So what Jaemark has shown us, right, he is a very successful journalist in using AI, right? In my case, not so much. So in my role at the Pulitzer Center, I'm the data editor. So my responsibility mainly is to support the journalists that we funded, right, on how to achieve their investigation goals. So there are all kind of challenges and all kind of different investigation tasks. And have been trying my best to try to incorporate AI to solve these problems. But most of the time, the results were not quite satisfactory, which is an understatement, right? So what you have seen from Jaemark is some of the very successful cases, right? But I'll tell you some stories about how I fail in working with AI. Then from there, probably we can derive some lessons from those cases. So the first one, I have as all most journalists face with, I have a stack of PDF documents. There are many tables in the PDF documents. So I asked AI, ChatGPT and Claude, right, to extract the table, put it into a machine-readable format, give me back the data in the table so I can copy-paste, put it into my spreadsheet, right? Very typical problem to solve. So I was starting with, the first 10 tables, no problems. And suddenly, there was one table. There's nothing special with that table. It's just a table in the PDF file. I put it into the chat LLM, and I got the results. And then I wanted to continue with the next table. And suddenly I saw like, why the data is special? Because the tables I put in is like a list of schools, right? Schools in Brazil, with the schools with the addresses, the name of the school, the address, contact number, all right? Usually these are the information. But in one table I saw coordinates of the schools, right? Coordinates is the X and Y, right? The latitude and the longitude. And I was like, no, I've never seen any table with coordinates, right? So I looked back, and guess what? The LLM, ChatGPT, just invented a new table for me. A whole new table with a list of school names that never exist, okay? With the coordinates as well. And the table, so I was like, oh, maybe this PDF has some hidden information, right? Maybe. Then I tried a second LLM. It works normal. It gives me the names of the schools, the address, and everything. But this LLM, ChatGPT, gave me the coordinates of the school. So of course I'm curious, like maybe there was some hidden information. So I checked the coordinates. Those are not coordinates in Brazil, okay? Those are just random coordinates all over the world, right? So then I asked myself, so what happened to the previous 10 or 20 or 100 tables that I asked ChatGPT to extract for me? Do I have to go back and fact check all of them? What would you do? Yeah, of course, you have to fact check, right? All right, that's one case. The second case, right, is more complex. I have a list of schools, again, in Brazil. I want to know whether these schools offer early childhood education, okay? So I developed very specific prompt, okay, for ChatGPT. First is like, you look for the name of the school, you Google it, okay? And then you read the websites, okay? You give me the list of websites that you read, because I want to fact check the steps, right? You give me the list of websites that you read, and I want you to give me a summary of the website. Like, what is this school about for each website that you read? And then the next column, you tell me whether they offer early childhood education or not, and why. Tell me the reason, right? So because why I don't just ask, oh, tell me whether this school give early childhood education, because I don't trust LLM. So I ask LLM, you explain to me, and you have to give me all the data every step of your verification. And guess what? At first it was okay, right? It was okay, and again, it got my trust, right? I was like, oh, the LLM is very good. And eventually, I found that after some times, I used both the chat interface as well as the API, okay? And I used 3 different LLMs, okay? And what happened is that after some times, the LLM started to hallucinate again. It created schools that never existed. It gave me the names of the schools that never existed, and it also gave me website that it says it visited, but there was no such website. And it gave me the list of URLs, the summary, and the results, and they never existed. But in my prompt, right, I already told, do not create anything based on what you read, and you give me the summary, right? And this was not like 1 year ago. This was like maybe 2 months ago, when LLM was said to be very good, right? So these are the two stories. Another one that my very few successful projects with AI is that at the Pulitzer Center, we work with a nonprofit called the Earth Genome, which is the technology nonprofit also based in the US. We developed a tool called Earth Index. You can Google it, it's already online, Earth Index. So what happened is we use machine learning to recognize satellite images. So what happened is that we have this model that if you fit the models with, let's say, 5 images of palm oil plantation, okay? And then you ask the model to say that based on these images, you search the whole Indonesia for me, and you tell me where are the palm oil plantations. And the results, we put in a step to say that you give me a reliability score, which means, you think that you are confident like 90% or 80% or 70%, right? Based on the results, based on the sample that we gave you, you learn from there, and you scan the whole country, and you tell me where are the other areas with similar features, okay? That works pretty well if you're able to adjust, let's say, the confidence level. And if you find that the results are not very good, you can provide more samples for the model to learn so that it gives you more better results, all right? So this word tools works very well. We use that to detect mice, all kind of different mice, airstrips in the forest in Amazon. We did it with gold mining in Cambodia. And now we are trying to use it for rubber plantation, all right? And the lessons from this experiments, right, is that we journalists, how our role has changed, especially as a data journalist, is that first, we need to know how we instruct LLM to work for us. And that is not something that is simple, no. A lot of people talk about prompt engineering, and prompt engineering is a skill. And the learning curve is not that low, actually. And that is just one part of the problem. The second part is that we have to learn how do we fact check and verify the results? And how do we improve the transparency of the LLM, right? So there's a term called the chain of thought. Like you ask LLM to explain to you how it arrives at the result, but still it is very hard to fact check, right? So these are some of the new skills that data journalists or investigative journalists have to develop, right? Most investigative journalists, I think, they are not used to asking people to do things for them because they like to do things themselves, right? But in this case, you're asking an AI assistant to do something for you. And how do you make sure that this assistant is accountable to you? And how do you make sure that the processes is transparent enough that you're able to fact check, right? So these are all the risks that I don't think we give enough emphasis so far. And I don't think there's enough discussions about all the risks and pitfalls and how do we put in guardrails, in using AI for data analysis or for investigation. That's one for journalists. The second one is, what about the editors? How, when your journalists file a story to you, you're able to go through the story, copy, edit it, fact check it, like in the past. But what if the story, the data analysis, the investigation was done using AI tools? And your journalist, your reporters send a copy to you, and you are the editor, right? Do you have the skill, do you have the tools to fact check the stories from your reporters? You can't use your traditional, conventional skills to do the same thing, right? You can go and ask like, okay, did you talk to this person? Did you have the recording? Yes. But what about now? What kind of questions you ask? You ask your journalist, did you keep a copy of your interaction with AI, right? And what are the steps that you put in to make sure that the AIs gave you something that is accurate, right? So the editors have to learn new skills as well. I think with this AI tool, it is useful, but at the same time, we need to really reskill and upskill ourselves, right? To be able to use it in a more accountable way, right? So I'll just rest it at there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keng. Thank you for sharing that hit and miss experiences. I would like to take this to a different point of view with Nenden's being here. Maybe you can reflect on how this affect, what is the implication for digital rights and freedom of expression?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I was a journalist. I have a computer science background. So yeah, even though I have those kind of like background, but actually I'm not really grasp all this innovation and the emerging technology that really fast. I can't really catch up actually. So maybe I will now talking with my hat as a civil society organization and activist that will criticize everything, right? So actually, when we heard what Jaemark presents previously, I'm quite optimistic actually on how AI can be used as one of innovation in the newsroom, right? But I know that when we're talking about the AI or emerging technologies and journalism, we're always talking about the innovation, the productivity, about the misinformation and disinformation, for example. But we are really talking about rights, right? About how it will affect the human rights, how it will affect the digital rights. So especially when we're talking about the freedom of expression, about the access to information, also the right to have the media diversity as well. So those kind of like issues that I can see that, I can tell it's quite limited when we're talking about that when we're talking in the aspects of AI and journalism. So I will talk a lot about those kind of issues. So as we know, maybe like how the AI systems mostly still develop from the Western or global North perspective, right? And then on how they use the data sets may be biased and mostly only use the data sets from the major perspective, for example. It can also generate the information that only reflects those kind of like issue. But how about the minorities, how the marginalized community? Jaemark also mentioned about the Filipinos accent on how it represents on the data set. It's because we have a privilege, for example, to put those kind of like data to the data set. But when we just rely on the AI system that developed by the global North perspective, we don't have this kind of like privilege. So when we're talking about that as well, how the algorithm now is also affecting how the news is distributed to the audience, I can say AI system, for example, the content recommender, for example, or the content moderation, it become a new gatekeepers, I can say, because those algorithm is also decide what kind of like news or what kind of article or what kind of information that can surface and can be enjoyed by the audience, for example. Yeah, those kind of like situation from the content moderation is also affecting on how the audience can access to the information. So actually, when we're talking about the freedom of expression, in theory, actually, generative AI is actually democratize how we create content, right? Because we can create a video with cheaper, easier. We don't have to have a lot of like a crews, for example, to generate or to create a videos, but we just need to have this kind of like prompt or some sentences and then ask the ChatGPT or any other AI system to create this kind of like videos. But in practice, the AI system, as I mentioned earlier, that now built by a data set that possibly biased and then not reflect the global majority voices or the global majority data set. So, for example, in Indonesian context, we have like more than 700 languages spoken across the archipelagos, but I believe that most of the data sets that used to train AI in Indonesia, for example, mostly using the Bahasa Indonesia or English, right? But not Bahasa Sunda or Bahasa Jawa. And then most of the information is also crawled from the Jakarta-centric information, for example, right? Or even Western information. So those kind of like data set is also affecting on how people eventually get the information from the AI generated system as well. So the information or the representation from the other region, for example, Papuas or or the rural areas is not really represented by what's generated by AI, because there's not enough data sets to train the AI, and then it can create a structural bias actually, right? So when someone, like ask ChatGPT to generate information about Indonesia, for example, the data that will appear or that will created is mostly about Indonesia in the perspective of Jakarta, for example, but not something related to Papua, because the data is not enough and the data is not represent what's actually happened on the ground, or what is actually happens in Indonesia. So, and then in our experience, in SAFEnet experience, we also do the monitoring about the digital rights violation, yeah, in Indonesia, for example. When Jaemark previously mentioned about on how one of the innovation of the newsroom that we can use is using the features of social media, right? For example, the filter, or if everyone here using Instagram, we know another feature called Add Yours, right? How we can like add a new Insta story, kind of like that. So like a few months ago, when we have a public protest in Indonesia, actually there's a kind of like movement to put some information regarding the protest itself on the Instagram. But then we found that a lot of like users complain or post some complaint, yeah, to our platform that said that those kind of like information that they already put on their stories through the Add Yours features, it's gone. We don't know, even though it's not 24 hours yet. So that's one cases. And then we also found that a lot of like information or content that published on the social media is, like not really distributed to the massive audience, because we suspect there's a shadow ban mechanism on those kind of algorithm. So those cases actually also show us on how the algorithm system is also can it's a form actually on how the algorithm can also discriminate or censor some information if we don't have any mechanism to challenge how actually the algorithm works. It's something that I think it will be a really big challenge in the futures, because as far as I know for now, for example, from my experience, all the AI system mostly working on the black box logic, right? We don't know how, we can understand how it works. We don't know how to challenge it. We don't know how to ask, where to ask. How is actually the chat GPT generate this kind of like hallucination, like Keng mentioned earlier. So the kind of like transparency is really not there yet when we're talking about on how we're using the AI system. And it's also implemented on how we're working on the newsroom, for example. Yeah, when some newsroom have the ability to create this AI system, is it already with the transparency of the mechanism on how the readers can challenge this kind of AI system on the newsroom, for example. So this kind of a transparency is really needed for now. And then on how we need to see or to give some, the accountability as well, or from the AI system. Maybe, yeah, we can tell about on how the AI system mostly know still developed from the global north perspective. But when we have those kind of like, resources to develop the AI system, we also should put the accountability and transparency first. So the readers know what they read, and then they know how to challenge it if they think that those kind of information that published by the newsroom it's wrong, for example. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there first. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nenden. Can we give her a round of applause? Thank you. Those are very important points raised, the transparency, the accountability, how we don't know how to challenge this. We just have to accept sometimes they hallucinate. So it's up to us right now to gatekeep, right, our content. So in the interest of time, I have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I'm opening the floor right now for the audience to ask questions to any of our panelists, including Jaemark. If you have any questions, just state your name and your organization and to whom your questions is addressed. We have some people holding mics, I assume. Raise your hands. Yes, over here, 1, 2, and then we have one more, maybe. Can we give to the front? And then the other. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Janet Steele, George Washington University, and I teach narrative journalism, long-form journalism. I wonder if each of you could give us really quickly an example of how AI has actually enhanced content in a long-form story, not a shortened version of a long-form story, but how it's actually made the story better.
Does anybody want to pick that? Oh, maybe can we harvest another question and then we go to the answers?
So I haven't seen any.
Sorry, Jaemark. Sorry. Can we harvest some more questions first? Yeah, silakan.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ika Idris. I'm from Monash University, Indonesia. I'd like to ask if any of you have experience using AI for delivering news or content that is relatively new for Global South. So in one of my students' project, for instance, he identified news related to energy transition and circular economy. And then he identified contents or news that was created using AI. Apparently, news that are created by AI, there's more of it, but it's just end up adopting news that cover the global north perspective, elite perspective, misleading or irrelevant problems. So for instance, for circular economy, news related to circular economy, those that are created by AI mostly talk about recycling. But we know that circular economy, it's not only about recycling, but when we look at news that are created by not AI or local news media, it's more relevant to the what we understand. I mean, like circular economy as a concept, yeah. So do you have any experience, for instance, when your newsroom or your organization want to cover concept that is relatively new, like circular economy, energy transition, from global north to global south and to the readers? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there another one? Okay, over here in the front. Front table, yes.
Hi guys, my name is Sergio, I'm from Brazil. I'm an executive director of a news organization there. Thank you very much, people, for your aircraft crash allegory. I'm not a big flyer myself, but one of the reasons, and listen to Keng's point as well, one of the reasons that we don't trust AI is because we supposedly built those systems so we don't have to trust them because they were going to work regardless, right? And we are kind of used to the idea that humans fail and they make mistakes and we are okay with that and we correct our mistakes, like the whole science is built on that, right? But AI, they are allegedly being built to be infallible. They're not supposed to fail at all. So, but as Keng mentioned, it does fail quite a bit, right? So I kind of wonder if we're ever going to be able to trust AI for such a sensitive industry as journalists, that we actually need facts to be verifiable. We cannot just trust that to AI model or anything. But because if it's a human, we we accept that possibility of mistakes. But AI, we say, no, this is not acceptable from a computer system, right? So I kind of want to see your point on that as well.
Okay, can we go straight to the answers? Jaemark, you went first. Go ahead.
Which question are we?
Any of those three. I think you were getting ready to answer the first one. So
No, I wanted to talk about the question about narrative journalism, and I don't think that's the right lens. Like, did AI improve this? The way I like to think AI is a tool. So it's like saying, did Microsoft Word improve narrative journalism? Maybe. And so, what elements of a narrative journalism feature could be improved by AI? Was there better data reporting that happened that supported the strength of that narrative journalism article because you used AI? Were there elements like visual elements that you put into the narrative that made it more compelling to the reader? And so my point of view on AI is that it's really a tool, and you know, we don't outsource the whole enterprise to that. And to serious point, it's weird that you would think that computer systems are inherently trustworthy, because the more I work on AI, the more I discover how bad it is. Like, I wouldn't trust it with anything that I would publish without doing my review. For example, I've been in Keng's shoes, where you would think it would be good at cleaning up data, which is the most tedious thing, but it actually expects you to do that job for it, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily trust it. And so I think there needs, to my last point earlier, I think journalists need to be involved in the design of these tools and these systems to be able to put those guardrails, to be able to trust it. Like, for example, my budget bot. People ask me, how do you verify the output, right? And so I would make the analogy to the fish vendor in the market who uses a calculator. How does she know that she keyed the result from the calculator is correct? She doesn't do the math in her head. She just tries calculating it again, and if it's reproducible, then that's one way to build trust, right? And so you have to build in those, you know, mechanisms of trust into the tools that you're using. And so I would push back on the idea that these systems are there to be infallible, when in fact, time and again, the experience has shown us that no, there are many things that it does well, but you know, 100% accuracy isn't one of them. And it goes to our jobs as journalists, right? What do we sell? What do we sell to our audiences? It's not just information. Anyone, you can get information is very cheap now. What we're selling to audiences today is our integrity. The fact that when we publish information there, you know, it's vetted, it's fact-checked. You're 100% sure I put my name in there, it's correct. If I make a mistake, you can sue me, and I've been sued, right? And so that's, I don't think fundamentally our jobs as journalists would change even with this new emerging technology.
Thank you, Jaemark. I think the second question, which hasn't been responded to, is quite important. Like, some of these concepts are so new. Maybe the data that is out there is not enough or sufficient to train the AI to give us, you know, content that is quite reliable. So maybe Peerapon would like to respond to that first. Oh, yeah. Okay, both of you.
Okay, I can go first. So if we really understand like how LLM works, right, it really depends on the data in, and then based on the data in, it is a very good, I would describe it as a very good autocomplete tool, right? If you understand the ways like how they attach vectors in every word and how they join the words together to give you the best answer. So that's why it explains the bias behind LLM, right? And so my personal rule is that I wouldn't use AI or LLM for knowledge-based problem, which means that something that I do not know, I ask AI to give me answer. I wouldn't do that. Because I know AI based on the answers given by others that fit into the system, and those answers are not 100% accurate, right? And they are biased. So if I ask the questions, then I will get, whatever the AI data is coming from. So I wouldn't do that. Then what would I do? I use AI for language-based problem. Language-based is like, can you help me to rewrite my content? Of course, always the disclaimer, without adding anything, without removing anything, right? Help me to improve my writing and help me to summarize things, right? And help me to do data analysis sometimes. So I wouldn't ask like questions like circular economy. And I think this I will extend from what Jaemark mentioned, is that brings us to another question, is that are we informing or educating our audience or our students enough how AI works and how you can best use AI? I think a lot of us do not know that. Even journalists, we don't really understand how it works, and we use it the wrong way. That's why it exposes us to a lot of risks and pitfalls, right? So one thing that I think as storyteller, right, as a journalist, that we should do more is to report about the accountability of AI use. So, for example, like at Pulitzer Center 3 years ago, we started our AI Accountability Fellowship. Plug-in, we are still recruiting for the next batch. Any journalist can join us to become the fellow. What we do is that our fellows, we don't use AI for reporting, but we are going to report on how AI is used in journalism, in governments, in governance, right? How about the working conditions of data labelers, right? A lot of them in the global south. This is the story that we should own, because these are the industry that have been outsourced to our people, right? And they don't have good job protection. They don't have good welfare, mental support, right? But we are actually the back engine that support the growth of the AI industry. But we don't report it enough ourselves, right? So I think how to make sure AI is accountable is one of the very important stories that we at the Global South should tell. And we have access to all these people. These are the people, the students, the part-timers that are around us. They are working to support the whole AI industry, and they are unseen. We don't see them, right, in this whole industry. There's a lot of hype about how great AI is, but there's very least reporting about what are the price that we paid, right? That's one end of it. The other end of it is the literacy part. Literacy is not just how to use AI, but how to make sure that AI is used in an ethical, accountable way, and how do we understand, what are the risks that AI brings to us when we use them, right? So that's the other end of it, right? So one is the user's problem, one is the AI workers problem. These are the two fields that I think we should cover a lot more, and we can do it much better, than our counterparts in the global north. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe Peerapon, because you're also in the field or in the space of fact checking. Maybe you can. Is that something that you're also looking into?
Yeah, I think those three questions is they are pinpoint the border of what we are looking to the AI now. But I think the most important answer is rely on the black box that she mentioned. If we cannot, if the AI cannot working out of that black box, we not trust them, wholly trust them, and go through the responsibility, accountability, and transparency question that is not like it's not good enough to do long form content. but I think the enhancing or help people who do long form content to make a better piece of long form is, I think AI may be a lot of helpful on that, like transcribe or help analyze before that before they publish, because it's very long form. Long form is like take time to export, to review, to edit. So yeah, so I think AI now they can help on that. And for the air crash, the air crash things, I think it's like there are, we trust human because I don't know, there are someone to blame or not, like suing case that you wrote. But AI, who will respond if AI crash the plane or crash the car? Who will be who responsible on that? Yeah, when this is not clear, so people, most of the people will they know when they use AI, they will not find anyone to respond on the error that may be damage the project or damage the situation. So yeah, so I think return to the black box things. If we get to the point that we could know how AI work and they can explain transparency, like they can explain the real reason why they suggest this or made a decision instead of us. Yes, if they come out of that black box, we can have more comfort to trust them. Yeah, so I think what my view about it.
Thank you so much. Nenden, would you have anything to add, especially when we talk about black box and what is the civil society is actually doing to push forward?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add something about the AI governance actually, on how we should put the human right-based approach when we're trying to regulate AI, not only on the country level, but also in the newsroom level, on how when we use the AI system on the newsroom, on how to ensure that there's a regulation, there's a ethics and guidelines in the newsroom on how the journalists or the editors can use AI. It's really important. And this regulation is also help us to ensure that how the AI system not weaponize actually to silence dissent opinion, for example, or to silence other voices. So those kind of like a approach, a human right-based approach is really important when we're talking about how we try to ensure that the AI system or AI mechanism is like transparent, accountable, and responsible as well. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yes. So I think we don't have time for more questions, but I really appreciate all the perspectives and the experience shared here. And I can probably just conclude that, yes, AI does help us as journalists. It does help the media. It enhances storytelling. It forces us to be a lot more creative, and it also helps us to be creative. Of course, there are some caveats. We still need humans. I think in times like this, the role of human to gatekeep that is even more important. And but we need, as journalists, as media practitioners, we do need to reskill and upskill. And a lot of the literacy work on AI needs to not just be on us as journalism profession, but also for the audience. And because right now we just know what AI is, we know how to use ChatGPT, but we really don't know about the ethical aspect, about all the risks of misinformation and disinformation. So yes, still a lot of work to be done, but I would like to thank all our panelists here for pushing out these issues, for helping us to think of AI in a different ways, and for making journalism better again. Thank you. Thank you, Jaemark, Peerapon, Keng, and Nenden. And I return the stage to the MC. Thank you, everyone.